Hey guys, welcome to the channel. I'm really excited to share some new functionality that Domo has released around Domo Jupyter. Um, the general gist of it is I had a support issue that I was working with some of the engineering team over at Domo on, and I was showing them my code sample, and they looked at it and they're like, Jay, storing credentials in plain text is bad. I was like, well, yeah, I know that, but you haven't given me any better alternatives to storing credentials in plain text in Domo, especially around sharing and all of that stuff. And I guess that's kind of a lie because what you could do is you can use load underscore .env, which is a package that will allow you to create a .env file that you store kind of on the side in Domo Jupyter. But it's still not great because as soon as I share that notebook with someone else, they can see my credentials. Or worse, there's nothing stopping me from accidentally printing my credentials on the screen. So in this tutorial today, I'm going to show you some new functionality in Domo. I'm going to teach you a little bit about data classes and using data classes to build a credentials object, which I use extensively in the code that I write. And all of this is with a goal of making sure that you never accidentally print your password in Jupyter ever again. Because printing your password on screen, especially on a YouTube video, is just absolute noob sauce. So here we go. This is typically how we do things, right? We would store our credentials either as a variable up at the top or as an object. And let's just go ahead and agree that that's bad. Because the problem is later down in your code when you're like troubleshooting or trying to figure out what's going on, we all do, print creds, and there's my password in plain text for YouTube to see. Not great. So what are our alternatives? Let me just jump straight into the new functionality. What Domo has done is they've given us the ability to access the accounts the account objects that we use to create data sets. Now, when you go and create a new data set, you have to put in credentials, right? So if I'm doing Google, for example, and I want to connect to Google Sheets, it'll say, all right, what are some of these credentials that I need to know? Or if I want to connect to Snowflake or Salesforce, right? We have all sorts of credentials that we can spin up. Now, the engineering team have come up with abstract credential store, which will allow me to store um, credentials pretty much exclusively for use in Python. So I'm going to just copy in a JSON string. I'm going to update my Domo instance to v3 fake creds just so we can recognize it later. And we're going to call this the fake creds v3. Cool. Going to go ahead and save that. I have fake creds v1, 2, and refresh my screen here. v1, 2, and 3, and then I have my real credentials that are stored under valid credentials. Great original names. Okay, let's jump back over to Jupyter Workspaces and see this puppy in action. Now, again, this is hot off the press. I'm not even sure this is in all GA instances of Domo that have Jupyter. So if you don't see this interface, talk to your CSM and ask them about getting this feature enabled. But what you have to do is go down to accounts, and now I can make some accounts available to me. I'm going to call this valid creds. And then I'm also going to share in my fake creds v3, update my workspace, jump back into Jupyter Workspaces, and hopefully here under the key, I should be able to see my fake creds 1, 2, and 3, as well as my valid creds. Again, brand new functionality. It may or may not be enabled in your instance, so if you don't see it, talk to your CSM. All right. So how does this work? What I can do is to access those fake creds v3, I can just double click And then Domo has some boilerplate code for me to take a look at. You can see here I'm using the Domo Jupyter library, which has been aliased as Domo. And Domo has a method called getAccountPropertyKeys. And so it's saying, hey, get the keys or get the properties of this fake creds v3. And let's just look at that. I'm going to simplify some of this. Actually, maybe I'll just move this down here so we can just focus. We do need to import the correct library. All right, so I run that, and let's go ahead and print account properties. So account properties is a list, and that list has one item in it called properties, and I know it's a list because if I try to subset it and say give me the 0 index item, it would just return credentials. There are no other items in this list. Good stuff. All right. I can also, in addition to just getting the keys, the property keys, I can actually get the property values. So I can say, hey, give me the account property value from the account called fake creds v3 and retrieve the 0th item in this list, which happens to be credentials. I could also just rewrite this as give me credentials. Just simplify things. And so now if I print account property value, I can print whatever was stored in credentials, which was this string here. Let me simplify all of this, get rid of the stuff I don't need. I don't need to get the account property keys. I know the key that I'm interested in is in credentials, and I know I'm interested in this account name. And you know what? I'm just going to shorten this to account string. And you might say, Jay, string, how do you know that that's a string? Well, I'm just going to prove it. So we'll say print the type of account string, and it's going to tell us that it's a string. Unless I have a typo. Okay, it is in fact a string. So if I want it to be a dictionary or an object, I need to process this. So I'll say creds object is equal to json.load string, account string. And now let's print the type of creds object. And it will tell us that it's a dictionary. Cool. Let's clean this up so it looks a little bit more presentable. All right. What did we do? From the fake creds v3, we read in the credentials field. We stored it as a string, converted it into an object, and now when I print it, oh, that's ugly. What if I pretty print it? Okay, so now we're pretty much where we started our tutorial with, only this time I don't actually have to store my credentials in clear text, which is great. So I'm going to delete that bit. Now, another thing I really like about this approach is, again, if I have to change my password and I have 50 different workbooks that are using that same set of credentials, that same account object, I just update the account object and all of my other code continues to work. So this is a much cleaner way of leveraging the Domo platform and different parts of the platform to do cool things in Jupyter. So yay, accounts. Good job, Domo team. I could stop the tutorial here, but really, like, this is only half of the story, right? I still have my creds object as an object, and the problem with that is that if I ever in other parts of my code print creds object, I will print my password, and that's the kind of stuff I don't want to have to worry about. I don't want to have to worry about accidentally exposing my code. So is there a way around this? Well, what if we use a data class? So from the library called DataClasses, I'm going to import data class. If you know nothing about working with classes in Python, kind of like me, I don't actually know that much. It's very, very much a Googleable thing. You can watch tutorials for days about working with classes, but I'm going to just give you guys like the whistle stop tour. I'm going to create a class, and let's call it Credential. Okay, and every class can have properties. So I'm going to have a property called Domo username. I'm going to have a property called Domo password, and I'm going to have a property called Domo instance. And all of these are going to be of type string. Very exciting. Now, if I want to create an instance of the credential class, I could say, hey, let's say my creds, let's call them my v3 creds, is equal to credential, and I want to instantiate it with the values Domo username is equal to creds object dot get Domo username. Ooh, this is going to be a lot of typing. And Domo instance is equal to creds object dot get Domo instance. And Domo password is equal to creds object dot get Domo password. Okay. So I've now created an instance. My headphones said they just died. I have now created an instance of the credential class called my v3 creds, which means if I print my v3 creds, I can print and I see, hey, I've printed out this credential class. It's got a username. Dang it, here's the password. Okay, if I want to get rid of the password, what I can do is I can say, hey, in my class declaration, I could say, hey, password is a field, and I'm going to set repr equal to false. Now I have to import the field class, I believe, from data classes. But repr stands for representation, and what this says is when I print or when I go to represent the credential class, I will not show this field. Let's see if that works. So here, let's print my v3 class. I have a username, an instance, no password. Very exciting. Okay, so what have we done? We've set up a data class. We've given it properties. We've defined how that property should work. Now, on top of that, with a class, you can also have methods. You can also make your class do fun stuff. I'm just going to give a really dumb example here. We're going to create a method called say hi, and it's not going to take any parameters. Now, every method in a class, most of them will accept, the normal ones will accept itself. It will accept the instance of that class as self. And then I can do something like print, hello, my name is self.domo username. So I can refer to properties of that instance of that class. Very exciting. All right, let's rerun my code here. Okay, print my v3 creds still behaves the same way, but this time if I call say hi, it will print, hello, my name is my name. Okay, very exciting. Let's call this a normal method. A different type of method is what's called a class method. what I want to do is I want to be able to have a method that will return an instance of the credential class. And the only thing I passed in was the account name. So it's not like up here. Here I said, hey, I want to create an instance of the credential class, and these are the values that I want to pass in. No, that's not what I want. What I want to do is I want to create a function that says, hey, do some stuff, and then return an instance of a credential class. So basically, I need to take all of this code that I wrote up here and then put it down into the class method. So yeah, I think I can just copy paste, right? What do I want it to do? So what I want you to call is I want you to call Domo get account property value. Instead of hard coding that I'm retrieving fake creds v3, I'm going to say give me the account name. Now, if I'm running this on abstract accounts, they will always have a property called credentials, which is what I want to read in as a string. So that's great. Then as part of this method, I will convert this string into a JSON object. And then I want you to return an instance of the credential class. Now, since this is a class method, I must always pass in the class. And standard practice is to just refer to it as CLS. The first argument of a class method will always be the class itself, so CLS. So I'll say, hey, return CLS and pass these parameters here. So it's going to return an instance of the credential class with creds object, which has been read in right there. Now, since I'm using the Domo library as well as the JSON library, I should probably import them. So I'm going to import these as part of my class method. So when I run this method, I will also import Domo Jupyter. I will import JSON. I'll do the thing, and then I will return the class. And this is still part of my class definition. Okay. And let's see. Just to prove that I'm not lying, I'm going to delete all of this code that I put in earlier, which means I'm definitely not starting this recording again. We're going to delete this code down here. Okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to say, hey, credential dot from abstract. I want to pass in my account name, which is fake creds v3. And we're going to store that as creds v3. Does that make sense? Yep. And let's see if it works. So I'm going to restart my environment and run it from the top. No errors. That's always encouraging. So can I print creds v3? That looks good. What if I change it to v2? Whoop. Nope, stop. Store it under v2, please. You can see here fake creds domo dojo. So I'm pulling from a different instance, right? So it is actually pulling different data. What if I grab fake credentials? Okay. Okay, so I can see here very clearly it's getting my creds from a different place. Um, that's actually pretty powerful stuff. Where it gets super interesting, right, is I have 1, 2, 3, 4 different set of credentials that I want to pull in. What if I created a list called account list, and I said, hey, I want you to pull in valid creds. I want you to pull in fake credentials. I want you to pull in fake creds v2, and I want you to pull in fake creds v3. So I'm going to create that list. And then, what if I said cred store is equal to, and let's do a list comprehension. What's a list comprehension? Well, a list comprehension says for cred in account list. Oh, I guess it's not a credential, it's an account. For account name in account list, what do I want you to do? I want you to return an instance of credential by using this from abstract account class method. Credential dot from abstract account, pass in the account name. So this function here should return the credential object for this account name, and all of that should get stored in a list called cred store. Let's see what happens when I print cred store. I get a list. Here's credential 1, my valid credentials. Here's credential 2, my not real creds. Credential 3, and v3. So I can see that I can successfully loop over all of these credentials, use the abstract method to receive the credential. Sorry, use the class method to return the credential. And again, what's very powerful about this is I could say, hey, go to credStore0 and run the method called, what was my method? Say hi. And I could do the same thing for method 2 as well without having to write that code all over again. Pretty good stuff. Where it really turns into proper magic is if I take my authentication method, and let's see if I can't work that into my class definition. So I'm going to define a function called getFullAuth. I'll pass in the instance username and password, and then it's going to return a session token. But this is a class method, so the first argument always should be self. And I'm like, guys, I don't want to have to pass in the Domo username and password and all of that stuff. That's all part of the class. So what if I remove those parameters and I say, hey, your URL is self.domoInstance, which is a property of the class, self.username, and self.domoPassword. So that's my body. Then I'm going to send the request. I'm going to print the results, and hopefully I'll have a session token on the end of it. And so what this method is going to return is the session token. Oof. Maybe. And I won't print data because I think data will include my password. All right, so let's redefine or run the credential class. I'm going to get my credential store going. I'm going to prove that credential store 2.sayHi works. Great. And now I'm going to try to get full auth. Is that what I called it? Get full auth. Do I need to print result? Ooh, I got no result back. Why? Do I need to import requests? Try that again. Oh no. Forbidden. So for some reason, I'm not not getting my authentication. Okay. Why not? So as a debugging step, I guess I can print my URL and I'll print my body. So my method is password, passing in my email address. Ah, I'm hitting I'm hitting a fake instance of Domo, so that won't work. I believe it was Cred's store 0. I think those were real. So I'm not going to print my password because we're trying to avoid that. So let me just take that out of the code altogether. And we're going to return session token. Okay, let's run that again. So why did this work this time and not in previous times? Well, let's go ahead and print cred store 0. If you'll recall, well, I didn't tell you, but the first set of credentials was a real Domo instance and the other ones weren't. So that's why it was throwing errors. Here we go. And then now when I go to get full auth, I actually get an auth token back. What's actually kind of clever though is because I'm using a method within my class, instead of just sending back the session token, I could also extend my class and say, hey, class, you're going to have a value called session token. It's going to be of type string. It's going to be a field, and the default value is going to be none. Because when I instantiate you, I don't know what your session token is because I haven't asked for it yet. But after I get full auth down here, I can say if data.get session token. So if this is successful, then self.session token is equal to data.get self session token. Did I misspell session token up here? Yeah. All right. So running through all that again, if I'm able to successfully get a session token back, I'm going to store it as session underscore token, and then I'm also going to return self.session token. All right. Let's update our cred store. And let's do this one at a time. When I print cred store, I've got my Domo username, Domo instance. I can see session token equals none. I will now get my full authentication, which successfully returned a session token. And this time, if I print cred store 0, it now has the credential, my Domo username, Domo instance, and it has my session token. And this is all well and good, but I don't really want to print out my session token. Nobody can read that. So we'll just come back into my class method. This is the final step. we're going to say repr equals false. So now the default value for my session token is none, and I will never print it. I will update my cred score, cred store. I will do my initial print as well as get my full authentication. So here's credential, Domo username, Domo instance. Notice no session token. When I run get full auth, I do return a session token. But if I print cred 0 again, you can't tell the session token is there. But you could do cred store 0 dot print dot session token. I can refer to it because it's there. All right, guys, that was the longest tutorial ever about this new feature in Domo, the accounts object integration. The whole reason I went through this tutorial is because storing your credentials in plain text just straight up is bad. And so I gave you an alternative to storing your plain text by developing a class called Credential, which was using the data class library. We learned how we can make it so that I don't print fields when I represent them or when I call the print function. We took a look at standard methods that operate on an instance of the class. So like say hi was able to print my name because my name was stored in the class. We also looked at using building a real function, in this case get full auth, which would run my full auth pipeline and refer to properties stored on the class, in this case the username, password, and instance. We looked at updating the self. We looked at updating the class by setting the self.session token equal to the results of my request. And what else did we do? We also looked at creating a class method. And again, the biggest difference between a class method and a normal method is the class method, in this case, was used to return an instance of the class, because I said, hey, loop over all of these accounts and return an instance of the credential class for each of these accounts. I hope you guys found that tutorial useful. I know it was a long one, but I'm trying to save you some headaches that it took me a couple of hours to figure out. So good luck, go forth, do great things.